The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Montana like a shroud, masking the world in whispers of gray and silver. Through this ethereal veil, a lone figure moved with deliberate steps across the weathered cemetery grounds, his boots leaving dark impressions in the dew-soaked grass. Jake Morrison had seen many things in his 43 years, but what awaited him beneath the ancient oak tree would challenge everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and the mysterious bonds that tie souls together across the veil of death. The call had come at dawn, crackling through his radio with the urgency that only came with genuine emergency. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring Willowbrook farm had been nearly breathless with concern. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. There was a horse, she'd said, a beautiful paint mare that had been standing vigil at one of the old graves for 3 days straight. The animal refused food, refused water, and seemed immune to any attempt at coaxing her away. The local authorities were baffled, and someone had suggested calling Jake, known throughout the county as a man who understood horses better than most people understood themselves. Jake paused at the rusted iron gate of Peaceful Valley Cemetery, taking in the scene before him. The cemetery was old, dating back to the 1800s, when the first settlers had carved their dreams from this unforgiving but magnificent landscape. Weathered headstones stood like silent sentinels, their inscriptions worn smooth by decades of wind and rain. Some leaned at precarious angles, others had fallen entirely, returning to the earth they had been meant to mark for eternity. But it was the site near the far corner that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. There, beneath the spreading branches of a massive oak tree whose trunk must have been ancient when the first grave was dug, stood the most magnificent horse he had ever laid eyes upon. She was a paint mare, her coat a stunning patchwork of chocolate brown and pristine white that seemed to shimmer even in the muted morning light. Her mane fell in gentle waves across her neck, and her tail, though tangled from her vigil, still held an elegance that spoke of careful breeding and loving care. The mare stood perfectly still, her head lowered toward a simple granite headstone that was newer than most of the others in the cemetery. Even from this distance, Jake could see the fresh flowers that had been recently placed there, their bright colors a stark contrast to the weathered stone and faded silk arrangements that adorned the older graves. The horse's posture spoke of a grief so profound that it seemed to emanate from her very being, creating an almost visible aura of sorrow that made Jake's heart ache with sympathy. As he approached, slowly, mindful not to startle the animal, Jake could make out more details of the scene. The grass around the grave had been trampled down where the mare had been pacing, creating a perfect circle of worn earth that told the story of her restless vigil. Her flanks showed the telltale signs of exhaustion and dehydration, and Jake could see the tremor in her legs that indicated she was operating on pure emotional energy rather than physical strength. "Easy, girl," he murmured softly, still several yards away. "Nobody's going to hurt you. Just want to understand what's going on here." The mare's ears swiveled toward his voice, but she didn't lift her head or acknowledge his presence beyond that small movement. Her focus remained fixed on the grave with an intensity that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Jake had seen horses grieve before, had witnessed the profound bonds they could form with humans and other animals, but this level of devotion was something beyond his extensive experience. When he was close enough to read the headstone, Jake stopped cold. The inscription was simple but elegant, carved in flowing script that spoke of care and love. Emma Rose Hartwell, beloved daughter and friend, age 23. She lived with joy and loved without limit. The dates showed that Emma had died just 1 week ago, and the freshness of the flowers confirmed that this was indeed a recent loss. Jake found himself studying the mare more closely, noting details that spoke of a life well lived and deeply cherished. Her hooves had been recently trimmed and showed the care of someone who understood proper horse maintenance. Her coat, despite the dust and debris from her 3-day vigil, still held the lustrous quality that came from good nutrition and regular grooming. This was not a neglected animal or a stray that had wandered into the cemetery by chance. This horse had been loved, cared for, and was now mourning someone who had clearly meant the world to her. "You belonged to Emma, didn't you, beautiful?" Jake said softly, settling himself on a weathered bench about 10 feet from the grave. He had learned long ago that patience was often the key to understanding horses, and this situation clearly called for the gentlest possible approach. "She must have been something special to earn this kind of devotion from you." The mare finally acknowledged his presence, lifting her head to regard him with eyes that held a depth of intelligence and sorrow that took Jake's breath away. They were the darkest brown he had ever seen, almost black, and they seemed to hold entire conversations within their depths. There was no fear in her gaze, no weariness of the stranger who had invaded her sacred space. Instead, there was a kind of weary acceptance, as if she understood that people would continue to come and try to take her away from this place, but she had made her choice and would not be moved. Jake sat in silence for nearly an hour, simply observing and letting the mare become accustomed to his presence. During this time, he noticed several people approaching the cemetery, only to stop and stare at the unusual sight before retreating. A few had attempted to come closer, but the mare had shown the first signs of agitation when they drew near, pawing the ground and laying her ears back in clear warning. With Jake, however, she remained calm, as if sensing that she posed no immediate threat to her vigil. The sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the morning mist and revealing the full beauty of the Montana landscape that surrounded the cemetery. Rolling hills stretched toward distant mountains, their peaks still crowned with snow despite the approaching warmth of late spring. It was the kind of view that poets wrote about and painters tried desperately to capture, but Jake found himself unable to appreciate the scenery while watching the mare's obvious suffering. "Mrs. Henderson said you haven't eaten or drunk anything in 3 days. Emma wouldn't want that for you, would she? She'd want you to take care of yourself." At the mention of Emma's name, the mare's ears pricked forward sharply, and she took a step closer to the headstone, lowering her muzzle until it almost touched the carved granite. The gesture was so human in its expression of love and loss that Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. In that moment, he understood that this was not simply a horse missing her owner. This was a soul mourning the loss of its other half, a bond so deep that death itself could not sever it. Jake pulled his cell phone from his pocket and dialed the number Mrs. Henderson had given him. When she answered, her voice was tight with worry and exhaustion. "Mr. Morrison? Oh, thank goodness. Were you able to get close to her? The poor thing just breaks my heart standing there like that. I've tried everything I can think of, but she won't budge." "I'm here with her now," Jake said quietly, keeping his voice low as not to disturb the mare.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"She moved here from back east after college. Said she wanted to live a simpler life closer to nature. That mare, her name's Luna, came with her. Emma used to say that Luna was her best friend, her confidant, her riding partner, and her therapy, all rolled into one beautiful package." Jake watched Luna as Mrs. Henderson spoke, noting how the mare's ears continued to track their conversation despite her apparent focus on the grave. "What happened to Emma?" "Car accident," Mrs. Henderson said simply. "Late at night, coming back from town. They say she fell asleep at the wheel, went off the road into Miller's Creek. By the time someone found her the next morning, it was too late. Luna was in the pasture when it happened, and Emma's cousin from Denver came to collect her belongings and make arrangements for the horse. But Luna broke out of her temporary pen the night before Emma's funeral and somehow found her way here. Been here ever since." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place for Jake.
Luna's devotion wasn't just the affection of a well-cared-for animal for her owner. This was the grief of a creature who had lost her entire world, her purpose, her reason for being. Emma had clearly been more than just Luna's owner. She had been her partner in every sense of the word. "The cousin?" Jake asked. "What are his plans for Luna?" Another pause, longer this time. "That's part of the problem, Mr. Morrison. He's from the city, doesn't know anything about horses. He was planning to sell her to whoever would take her, just wanted to be done with the whole situation as quickly as possible. But now, with her acting like this, he's talking about having her put down. Says she's clearly traumatized beyond help, and it would be the kindest thing to do." Jake felt a surge of anger so intense it surprised him. The idea of destroying this magnificent animal simply because she was grieving seemed not just wrong, but almost criminal. "When is he planning to do this?" "He's given it until tomorrow," Mrs. Henderson said quietly. "If Luna can't be moved by then, he's calling the vet. Mr. Morrison, I've tried everything I can think of. I even brought my own horse down here, thinking maybe Luna would follow him back to my barn, but she wouldn't even look at him. She's made up her mind, and I don't know how to change it." Jake stood up slowly, his decision crystallizing as he watched Luna maintain her vigil. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to do me a favor. Can you call Emma's cousin and tell him I'd like to speak with him? I might have a solution that could work for everyone." "Oh, Mr. Morrison, I hope so. That horse deserves better than what she's facing. Emma loved her so much, and Luna loved her right back. It seems wrong to punish her for being loyal." After ending the call, Jake approached Luna more closely, moving with the slow, deliberate steps he had learned from years of working with traumatized and difficult horses. She watched him come, but didn't retreat, her dark eyes following his every movement with an intelligence that continued to astound him. "Luna," he said softly, testing her response to her name. Her ears pricked forward immediately, confirming what he had suspected. "That's a beautiful name for a beautiful girl. Emma chose well." He stopped about 3 feet from the grave, close enough to see the details of the headstone more clearly. Someone had placed a small bouquet of wildflowers at its base, and Jake noticed that they were the same varieties that grew wild in the meadows surrounding the cemetery. Luna had been bringing Emma flowers, he realized with a start. The mare had not just been standing vigil, but actively tending to her human's final resting place. "You've been taking care of her, haven't you?" Jake murmured, his voice full of wonder and respect. "Even now, you're still taking care of Emma." Luna turned her head to look at him directly, and in that moment, Jake felt a connection spark between them. It wasn't the instant bond he had heard other horsemen describe, but rather a recognition of shared understanding. They were both creatures who valued loyalty, who understood the depth of love that could exist between different species, and who believed that some bonds transcended even death itself. Jake slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an apple he had grabbed from his truck before entering the cemetery. Luna's nostrils flared as she caught the scent, and for the first time since his arrival, he saw a flicker of interest in her eyes that wasn't related to her grief. "I bet Emma used to bring you apples," he said conversationally, holding the fruit in his open palm but making no move to approach closer. "I bet she spoiled you rotten with treats and scratches behind the ears and long rides through these beautiful hills." Luna took a hesitant step toward him, then stopped, torn between her vigil and her basic needs for her body. Jake could see the internal struggle playing out in her expressive features, the battle between her determination to stay with Emma and her growing awareness of her own physical limitations. "It's okay," Jake assured her gently. "Taking care of yourself doesn't mean you're abandoning her. Emma would want you to be healthy and strong. She'd want you to remember the joy you shared together, not just the sadness of losing her." Another step, this one more confident, Luna stretched her neck toward the apple, her soft muzzle brushing against Jake's palm as she carefully took the fruit. She crunched it slowly, thoughtfully, never taking her eyes off his face. When she had finished, she moved closer still, until she was standing near enough for Jake to reach out and touch her neck if he chose to. "That's a good girl," he praised softly. "Emma raised you right, didn't she? Taught you to trust good people and accept kindness when it's offered." Jake's phone rang, startling both him and Luna. She stepped back quickly, but not as far as he had expected, and her ears remained forward rather than pinned back in alarm. He checked the caller ID and saw Mrs. Henderson's name. "Mr. Morrison? I spoke with Emma's cousin, David Hartwell. He's driving down from Denver this afternoon and said he'd be happy to meet with you." He sounded relieved, actually, like he's been hoping someone would step in and help with the situation. "Good," Jake replied, his eyes never leaving Luna. "What time will he be here?" "Around 4 o'clock. He asked if you could meet him at the cemetery so he could see Luna's condition for himself. I think he's feeling guilty about the whole situation, but doesn't know what else to do." Jake glanced at his watch. It was just past noon, which gave him several hours to continue building trust with Luna. "Tell him I'll be here. And, Mrs. Henderson, could you bring some fresh water and maybe some hay? Luna needs to start taking care of herself, and I think she might be ready to accept help if it's offered the right way." "Of course. I'll be there within the hour. And, Mr. Morrison, thank you. Emma was like a daughter to me, and knowing that Luna might have a chance at a good life would mean the world to her memory." After ending the call, Jake settled back onto the bench, this time angling his body so that he was facing both Luna and Emma's grave. The mare had returned to her position near the headstone, but she was no longer ignoring his presence entirely. She kept glancing at him, as if reassessing his potential threat level and finding him gradually more acceptable. "I never met Emma," Jake said aloud, speaking to both Luna and the grave itself. "But from what Mrs. Henderson tells me, she was someone special, the kind of person who forms deep connections and loves without reservation. You're proof of that, Luna. The fact that you're here, that you refuse to abandon her even in death, shows just how much love existed between you two." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves of the oak tree and carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. Luna lifted her head, her nostrils flaring as she tested the air, and Jake wondered if she was remembering rides through these hills with Emma, mornings when they would set out together to explore the vast Montana landscape that stretched beyond the horizon. "I have a ranch about 20 miles from here," Jake continued, his voice taking on a conversational tone that seemed to soothe Luna. "It's not huge, but it's got good pasture and a warm barn and plenty of room for a horse to run and play. I've got 3 other horses there right now, all rescues like you might be. There's Chester. He's an old quarter horse who came to me after his owner passed away. Spent the first month standing at the fence line, looking down the road like he was waiting for someone to come back for him." Luna's ears swiveled toward him, and Jake could see that she was listening intently to his words. "Then there's Daisy, a little paint mare not too different from you. She was neglected, half-starved when I got her, didn't trust humans at all. Took almost a year before she'd let me touch her without flinching. And Ranger, he's a Mustang who was captured in a roundup, wild as the wind when he arrived, but with patience and respect, he learned that not all humans are threats." Jake paused, watching Luna's reaction to his stories. She had moved closer again, drawn by the gentle cadence of his voice and perhaps by some instinct that recognized him as someone who understood horses at a fundamental level. "The thing about grief is that it changes us, but it doesn't have to destroy us. Chester still looks down that road sometimes, but he's also learned to enjoy the company of the other horses and the simple pleasure of good grass and warm sunshine. Daisy learned to trust again, to accept love and care from new sources. And Ranger, well, he discovered that freedom doesn't always mean being alone." Mrs. Henderson arrived as promised, her small pickup truck loaded with supplies for Luna. She approached quietly, clearly awed by the sight of Jake sitting so close to the mare who had refused all human contact for 3 days. "She looks better already," Mrs. Henderson whispered, setting down a bucket of fresh water and several flakes of good quality hay. "More alert, less defeated." "She's starting to trust," Jake replied quietly. "But we need to be careful not to push too hard, too fast. She's made progress, but she's still deeply grieving." They worked together to arrange the food and water within Luna's reach, but far enough from the grave that she wouldn't feel they were intruding on her sacred space. Luna watched their every movement, but showed no signs of the agitation she had displayed with previous visitors. "I brought some of Emma's things," Mrs. Henderson said, pulling a worn leather halter from her truck. "I thought if maybe Luna could smell Emma's scent, that might comfort her somehow." Jake examined the halter, noting the careful repairs and the way the leather had been softened by years of use and care. It told the story of a partnership built on mutual respect and trust, of countless hours spent together in work and play. "May I?" he asked, holding up the halter. Mrs. Henderson nodded. "Emma would want Luna to be happy. If this helps, then we should try it."
Jake approached Luna slowly, the halter held loosely in his hands. As soon as the mare caught Emma's scent on the leather, her entire demeanor changed. She whickered softly, a sound full of longing and recognition, and stretched her neck toward the familiar object. "Yes, that's Emma's halter," Jake murmured, allowing Luna to thoroughly investigate the leather with her sensitive muzzle. "She's not gone completely, is she? She's still here in all the things she loved, in the memories you carry, in the trust she taught you to have in good people." Luna allowed Jake to slip the halter over her head, the first time she had worn any kind of tech since arriving at the cemetery. The familiar weight and scent seemed to ground her somehow, reminding her that she was not just a wild creature lost in grief, but a domesticated horse with a history of partnership and cooperation with humans. "That's incredible," Mrs. Henderson breathed. "In 3 days, nobody's been able to get within arm's length of her." "Sometimes it's not about forcing a connection," Jake replied, gently stroking Luna's neck. "Sometimes it's about proving that you're worthy of trust, that you understand and respect what they're going through." The sound of a car engine approaching made them all turn toward the cemetery entrance. A silver sedan navigated the narrow gravel road carefully, coming to a stop near the gate. A man in his 30s climbed out, dressed in business attire that looked distinctly out of place in the rural cemetery setting. "That must be David," Mrs. Henderson said, "Emma's cousin from Denver." Jake watched as the man approached hesitantly, his city shoes slipping slightly on the dew-dampened grass. David Hartwell was clearly uncomfortable in this rural setting, but Jake could see genuine concern in his expression as he took in the sight of Luna standing quietly beside Emma's grave. "Mr. Morrison?" David called out when he was still several yards away. "Mrs. Henderson said you might be able to help with this situation." "That's right," Jake replied, keeping his voice calm and steady so as not to alarm Luna. "Why don't you come a bit closer so we can talk properly?" David approached cautiously, clearly nervous about being near such a large animal. Luna watched him with interest, but no alarm, perhaps recognizing some family resemblance to Emma or simply responding to Jake's calm acceptance of the newcomer. "I have to admit," David said quietly, "I don't know anything about horses. Emma was always the animal lover in the family. When I got the call about the accident, I just knew I had to come and take care of her affairs, but I never expected to deal with something like this." "Tell me about Emma," Jake said simply. "What was she like?" David's expression softened as he spoke about his cousin. "Emma was one of those people who just radiated joy, you know? Even as kids, she was always rescuing some injured bird or stray cat, always believing that love could fix anything. When she moved out here, my whole family thought she was crazy, giving up a promising career in marketing to live in the middle of nowhere,
all for what she called a more authentic life. But she was happy here? Happier than I had ever seen her. Every time we talked on the phone, she'd go on and on about Luna, about their rides together, about how connected she felt to the land and the animals. I never really understood it, but I could hear the joy in her voice. She'd found her place in the world. Jake stroked Luna's neck gently, feeling the mare's attention split between the conversation and her vigilant watch over Emma's grave. And now you're faced with deciding Luna's future. David nodded, his discomfort evident. I live in a high-rise apartment in downtown Denver. I travel constantly for work. I couldn't take care of a goldfish, let alone a horse. I thought the kindest thing would be to find someone who could give Luna a good home. But then this happened. He gestured toward the grave. The vet I spoke with said this kind of behavior sometimes indicates a horse that's become too traumatized to be safely handled. He recommended euthanasia as the most humane option. And what do you think Emma would want for Luna? The question hung in the air between them, and Jake could see David struggling with the weight of making a decision that would honor his cousin's memory while dealing with a situation completely outside his experience. Emma would want Luna to be happy, David said finally. She'd want her to have a good life, to be loved and cared for the way Emma loved and cared for her. But I don't see how that's possible when Luna won't even leave this grave. Jake had been building toward this moment all day, and he knew that what he said next could determine Luna's fate. What if I told you there might be another option? What if Luna could stay in this area, where she feels close to Emma, but still have a chance at a full and happy life? David's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of option? I'd like to take Luna home with me. My ranch isn't far from here, maybe 20 miles. Close enough that she could still feel connected to this place where Emma is buried, but far enough to give her space to heal and learn to live again. You'd want to buy her? David asked, clearly relieved at the prospect of a solution that didn't involve putting Luna down. I'd want to give her a home, Jake corrected gently. I'm not looking to buy a horse, Mr. Hartwell. I'm looking to save one. If you're willing to sign over ownership to me, I'll take full responsibility for Luna's care for the rest of her life. She'll have good pasture, shelter, veterinary care, and all the time she needs to work through her grief. David looked from Jake to Luna, taking in the sight of the magnificent mare standing calmly beside the stranger who had somehow earned her trust in a single morning. What makes you think you can help her when no one else has been able to? Experience, Jake replied honestly. I've been working with traumatized horses for over 20 years. I understand that healing takes time, patience, and respect. Luna isn't broken, Mr. Hartwell. She's grieving. There's a big difference. But how would you get her to leave here? She's been standing at that grave for 3 days. Jake smiled slightly, the first truly confident expression he had shown all day. I'm not going to force her to leave. I'm going to give her a reason to want to come with me. Luna suddenly lifted her head, her ears pricked forward with intense alertness. All 3 humans followed her gaze toward the cemetery entrance, where another vehicle was approaching. This one was different, though, an old pickup truck that moved with the confidence of someone familiar with rural roads. Mrs. Henderson shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun. That's Dr. Martinez, the veterinarian. I called her this morning when I was so worried about Luna not eating or drinking. Dr. Maria Martinez climbed out of her truck with the easy grace of someone who had spent decades making house calls to farms and ranches throughout the region. She was a woman in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind eyes that immediately assessed both Luna's physical condition and the dynamics of the group gathered around the grave. Good afternoon, everyone, she said, her voice carrying the calm authority that came from years of dealing with both animals and their anxious owners. Mrs. Henderson, you said on the phone that Luna here has been refusing food and water for 3 days? That's right, doctor, though Mr. Morrison here seems to have made some progress with her. Dr. Martinez turned her attention to Jake, taking in his relaxed posture and Luna's calm acceptance of his presence. Jake Morrison, I should have known. Your reputation with difficult horses precedes you, Mr. Morrison. What's your assessment of the situation? Luna's grieving, Jake said simply. She's not sick or traumatized in the way that would require medical intervention. She's processing a profound loss and trying to maintain her connection to someone who meant everything to her. The veterinarian approached slowly, her experienced eye cataloging Luna's condition as she drew nearer. May I examine her? I promise to be gentle and respectful of whatever bond you've established. Jake nodded, maintaining his position at Luna's side, but stepping back slightly to give Dr. Martinez room to work. Luna watched the newcomer with interest, but no fear. Her trust in Jake apparently extended to anyone he deemed acceptable. Dr. Martinez's examination was thorough but gentle. Her hands moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood that animals could sense tension and uncertainty. She checked Luna's eyes, listened to her hardened breathing, felt along her legs for signs of injury or strain from her long vigil. Physically, she's in remarkably good condition considering her ordeal, the vet pronounced finally. Slightly dehydrated, somewhat underweight, but nothing that proper care can't remedy quickly. The question is whether she's psychologically prepared to accept that care. What do you mean? David asked, his concern evident. Sometimes animals can become so fixated on grief that they essentially give up on life. They stop eating, stop drinking, stop engaging with the world around them. If that's what's happening here, then the prognosis is quite poor. But that's not what's happening with Luna, Jake interjected confidently. She ate an apple I offered her this morning, and she's been drinking from the water Mrs. Henderson brought. She's grieving, yes, but she's not giving up. She's just trying to figure out how to go on without Emma. Dr. Martinez studied Luna's face, noting the alertness in her eyes and the way she continued to track the conversation around her. You may be right, Mr. Morrison. There's definitely intelligence and awareness there. She's not the vacant, defeated animal I sometimes see in cases of severe psychological trauma. So what do you recommend? David asked. Time and patience, the vet replied. If Mr. Morrison is willing to take responsibility for Luna's care, I think that's probably her best chance at recovery. The bond he's already established with her in one morning is more progress than anyone expected. David looked relieved, the weight of an impossible decision finally lifting from his shoulders. Mr. Morrison, if you're serious about taking Luna, I'd be grateful to sign the papers. I just want to know she'll be loved and cared for the way Emma would have wanted. She will be, Jake assured him. But I need to be honest with you about something. This isn't going to be a quick process. Luna may never be the same carefree horse she was with Emma. Grief changes us all, animals included. She'll need time to learn to trust again, to find joy in life again. Emma would understand that, David said softly. She always believed that healing was possible, no matter how deep the wound. If she were here, she'd tell Luna to take all the time she needed. As if responding to the mention of her beloved human's name, Luna lifted her head and looked directly at David for the first time since his arrival. For a moment, the resemblance between the cousins must have been strong enough for Luna to recognize, because she took a tentative step toward him, her nostrils flaring as she tested his scent. "Hello, Luna," David said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma told me so much about you in her letters. She said you were the best friend she'd ever had." Luna stretched her neck toward David, allowing him to touch her muzzle gently. The contact lasted only a few seconds before she stepped back, but it was enough to establish a connection, a recognition of shared loss and love for the woman who had brought them together. "I think that settles it," Dr. Martinez said with satisfaction. "Luna's ready to start the next chapter of her life. It won't be easy, but she's got the strength and the support she needs to get through it." The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the cemetery as the group made arrangements for Luna's transition to Jake's ranch. David produced the necessary paperwork from his car, and Dr. Martinez offered to provide ongoing veterinary care as Luna adjusted to her new home. "There's just one more thing," Jake said as they finalized the details. "I'd like Luna to be able to visit Emma's grave regularly, at least at first. I think it will help her adjustment if she knows she's not being separated permanently from this place." "Of course," David agreed immediately. "Whatever Luna needs." Mrs. Henderson wiped away tears as she watched the arrangements being made. Emma would be so happy to know that Luna's going to have a chance at a good life. She worried sometimes about what would happen to Luna if something ever happened to her. "Well, she doesn't have to worry anymore," Jake said firmly. "Luna's going to be fine. It'll take time, but she's going to learn to live and love again." As the group prepared to leave the cemetery, Luna made one final gesture that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She approached Emma's grave one last time, lowering her head to nuzzle the headstone gently. Then she picked up the small bouquet of wildflowers that had wilted during her vigil and carefully placed them directly on top of the grave marker, as if making a final offering to her beloved human. "She's saying goodbye," Mrs. Henderson whispered. "She knows it's time to go." Luna turned away from the grave and walked directly to Jake, pressing her forehead against his chest in a gesture of trust and acceptance that spoke louder than any words could have. She was ready to begin the long journey toward healing, ready to honor Emma's memory by choosing to live and love again. Jake gently stroked Luna's neck, feeling the weight of responsibility and the promise of hope in equal measure. "Come on, beautiful girl. Let's go home." As they prepared to load Luna into the horse trailer that Dr. Martinez had called to the cemetery, David looked back one final time at Emma's grave beneath the ancient oak tree. He couldn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a story that would test everything he thought he knew about love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all living beings across time and space. The real miracle wasn't that Luna had found someone willing to care for her in her grief. The real miracle was what would happen next, as both horse and human learned that sometimes the greatest love grows not from avoiding loss, but from having the courage to open your heart again after it's been broken. Luna took one last look at the grave that had been her world for 3 days, then followed Jake toward the trailer with steady, trusting steps. Behind them, the wildflowers she had placed on Emma's headstone caught the golden light of late afternoon, a final gift from a loyal heart to the human who had shown her what love could be. The first chapter of Luna's new life was about to begin, and neither she nor Jake could imagine the extraordinary journey that lay ahead of them. But as the trailer pulled away from Peaceful Valley Cemetery, carrying Luna to her new home, one thing was certain: Emma's legacy of love would live on in the magnificent mare who had refused to abandon her, even in death. The wind whispered through the oak tree, rustling the leaves in what sounded almost like a benediction, as if Emma herself was giving her blessing to the new beginning that was unfolding. Luna was finally ready to leave her vigil, but she would carry the love that had sustained her through those dark days for the rest of her life, a beacon of hope for any creature who had ever known the pain of losing someone irreplaceable. And Jake Morrison, a man who had dedicated his life to healing broken horses, was about to discover that sometimes the creatures we save end up saving us in return in ways we never could have imagined. The Healing Hearts Ranch stretched across 200 acres of pristine Montana wilderness, its weathered fence posts and rolling pastures telling the story of 4 generations of careful stewardship. Jake had inherited the land from his grandfather, along with a deep understanding that some places were meant to heal broken spirits, both human and animal. As the horse trailer wound down the gravel drive toward the main barn, Luna pressed her face against the slats, her dark eyes taking in every detail of what would become her new world. The other horses in the pasture lifted their heads at the sound of the approaching trailer, their curiosity evident in the way they gathered near the fence line. Chester, the old quarter horse with the graying muzzle, stood at the front of the group, his wise eyes seeming to understand that another wounded soul was about to join their small herd. Beside her, Daisy pawed the ground nervously, her own memories of abandonment making her sensitive to the arrival of newcomers. Ranger remained aloof near the back of the group, his wild Mustang heritage still evident in the way he assessed potential threats or changes to his environment. Jake had spent the drive from the cemetery in thoughtful silence, his mind already working through the challenges that lay ahead. Luna had made remarkable progress in accepting his presence, but he knew that the real test would come when she realized she was truly separated from Emma's grave. The familiar environment of the ranch, with its strange sounds and smells and the presence of other horses, might trigger a setback in her fragile emotional state. The barn itself was a testament to Jake's philosophy of horse care. Built from locally sourced timber and designed with both function and comfort in mind, it provided shelter from Montana's harsh weather while maintaining an open, airy atmosphere that never made the animals feel confined. Each stall was spacious and well-bedded, with windows that allowed the horses to see out into the pastures and maintained visual contact with their herd mates. Dr. Martinez had followed them to the ranch in her own truck, wanting to oversee Luna's transition and ensure that any signs of distress were immediately addressed. As they pulled up to the barn, she climbed out and began preparing the mild sedative she had suggested might help Luna cope with the stress of her first night in an unfamiliar place. The unloading process required infinite patience and careful choreography. Luna had ridden quietly during the journey, but as the trailer came to a stop and the engine fell silent, she began to show signs of agitation. Her breathing quickened, and she shifted restlessly in the confined space, clearly understanding that she was now far from the cemetery where she had maintained her vigil.
Jake opened the trailer door slowly, speaking in the same gentle tones he had used at the cemetery. "Easy, beautiful girl. I know this is scary, but you're safe here. This is going to be your home now, a place where you can heal and learn to be happy again." Luna's eyes were wide with anxiety as she backed out of the trailer, her hooves striking the ground with nervous energy. She immediately began searching the horizon, as if looking for some familiar landmark that would orient her to Emma's location. When she couldn't find what she was seeking, a low whicker of distress escaped her throat. The sound brought an immediate response from the horses in the pasture. Chester approached the fence line and called back to Luna, his voice carrying a warmth and reassurance that seemed to surprise her. Daisy added her own gentle nicker, while even the aloof ranger took a few steps closer, his keen instincts recognizing another creature in need of comfort. Jake led Luna slowly toward the barn, allowing her to stop and investigate anything that caught her attention. The process took nearly an hour, as Luna examined every post, every shadow, every unfamiliar scent with the thoroughness of an animal trying to map a new territory while dealing with overwhelming grief. The stall Jake had prepared for Luna was the largest in the barn, positioned so that she could see out into the main pasture where the other horses grazed. He had bedded it deeply with fresh straw and filled the water trough with clean, cool water. A generous helping of high-quality hay waited in the corner, along with a small portion of sweet feed that he hoped might tempt her appetite. Luna entered the stall hesitantly, her body language still tense with anxiety and uncertainty. She investigated every corner, sniffing at the walls and pawing at the bedding, as if trying to make sense of this strange new environment. When she discovered the hay, she took a few tentative bites, more from habit than hunger, before returning to her restless exploration. Dr. Martinez had been observing Luna's behavior carefully, noting the signs of stress and displacement that were to be expected in her situation. "She's handling it better than I anticipated," she told Jake quietly. "Some horses would be having complete meltdowns by now. Luna's still processing and trying to adapt rather than shutting down entirely." Jake nodded, his eyes never leaving Luna as she continued to pace the stall. "She's a strong horse, mentally and emotionally. Emma raised her well, gave her a solid foundation of trust and security that's serving her now, even in the worst circumstances." As evening approached, Jake made the decision to leave Luna's stall door open so that she could move freely between the barn and the small paddock attached to her quarters. It was a calculated risk, as there was always the possibility that a distressed horse might try to escape and return to familiar territory. But Jake's instincts told him that Luna needed the freedom to choose her own level of comfort, to feel that she had some control over her environment during this difficult transition. The first night was challenging for everyone involved.
Luna spent most of the dark hours pacing between her stall and the paddock, occasionally calling out with a mournful whinny that seemed to carry all her longing for Emma and the life they had shared together. Jake slept in the barn office, wanting to be close enough to respond immediately if Luna showed signs of serious distress or attempted to escape. Around 3 in the morning, Luna's pacing finally slowed, and she approached the fence that separated her paddock from the main pasture where the other horses dozed. Chester had positioned himself as close to the fence as possible, and as Luna drew near, the old horse extended his muzzle toward her in a gesture of greeting and comfort. For several minutes, the two horses stood nose to nose through the fence, engaged in the kind of wordless communication that humans could only guess at. Chester's presence seemed to calm Luna somewhat, and eventually she moved to a corner of her paddock where she could maintain visual contact with him while finally allowing herself to rest. Jake watched this interaction from the barn window, understanding that it represented a crucial first step in Luna's healing process. The acceptance of comfort from another horse, even in this limited way, suggested that her capacity for connection had not been destroyed by grief. She was still capable of forming bonds, of accepting the presence of others who understood suffering and survival. The next morning brought new challenges and small victories. Luna showed more interest in her breakfast, eating nearly half of the hay Jake provided and drinking a substantial amount of water. Her coat, which had been dull and dusty from her days at the cemetery, began to show signs of improvement as proper nutrition and hydration started to restore her natural luster. Jake introduced a routine that would become the foundation of Luna's recovery. Each morning, he would spend at least an hour simply sitting in her paddock, reading aloud from veterinary journals or ranch management guides. The content didn't matter. What mattered was the consistent presence of a calm, non-threatening human voice that gradually became associated with safety and care. Dr. Martinez visited daily during Luna's first week at the ranch, monitoring her physical recovery and providing professional insight into her emotional state. The veterinarian was impressed by the steady, if slow progress Luna was making. "Her appetite is improving daily," Dr. Martinez reported after her 5th visit, "and her interaction with the other horses is becoming more frequent and natural. She's beginning to exhibit normal horse behaviors again, which is a very positive sign." Indeed, Luna had begun to show interest in the activities of the other horses. She would watch from her paddock as they grazed and played in the main pasture, her ears pricked forward with curiosity rather than the flat, dejected expression she had worn during her first days at the ranch. Occasionally, she would call to them, and they would respond, creating a dialogue across the fence that seemed to comfort all parties involved. The breakthrough came during Luna's 2nd week at the ranch. Jake had been working with a young colt named Thunder, who had arrived the month previously after being abandoned by his previous owners. Thunder was skittish and distrustful, requiring the same patient approach that Jake was using with Luna. As Jake worked with Thunder in the round pen, Luna positioned herself at the fence of her paddock to watch the training session. Her attention was completely focused on the interaction between human and horse, and Jake could see her processing the gentle methods he was using to build trust and communication with the frightened colt. When Thunder finally allowed Jake to approach and touch his neck, Luna whickered softly, a sound that seemed to express approval or recognition. It was the first time she had voluntarily made a noise that wasn't related to distress or calling for Emma. Jake turned toward Luna, his heart pounding with the significance of the moment. "Did you like that, beautiful girl? Do you remember what it feels like to work with a human partner?" Luna's response was to move closer to the fence, her body language more open and interested than it had been since her arrival. For the first time, she seemed to be seeing Jake not just as a caretaker who provided food and shelter, but as a potential partner in the kind of collaborative relationship she had shared with Emma. The next day, Jake made a decision that would prove crucial to Luna's recovery. Instead of simply sitting in her paddock, he brought a halter and lead rope with him, moving slowly and deliberately so as not to alarm her. Luna watched his approach with interest rather than fear, and when he stopped a few feet away and extended his hand, she moved forward to investigate. "I'd like to take you for a walk, just around the ranch, so you can see your new home properly. Would you like that?" Luna allowed him to slip the halter over her head, the familiar weight and pressure seeming to awaken memories of the partnership she had shared with Emma. As Jake clipped the lead rope to the halter ring, Luna straightened her posture, her body language shifting from that of a grieving animal to that of a horse ready to work with a human partner. Their first walk together was a revelation for both of them. Luna moved beside Jake with the fluid grace of a horse that had been trained to match his human's pace, to respond to subtle cues and changes in direction. Her ears were forward and alert, taking in all the sights and sounds of the ranch with genuine curiosity for the first time since her arrival.
They visited the main pasture, where the other horses gathered at the fence to greet Luna properly. Chester nickered a warm welcome, while Daisy pranced excitedly at the prospect of a new herdmate. Even Ranger approached the fence, his wild eyes studying Luna with what might have been approval. "These will be your friends," Jake told Luna as they stood at the pasture fence. "Chester is the elder statesman around here, full of wisdom and patience. Daisy's got a heart as big as Montana, and she'll spoil you rotten if you let her. Ranger keeps to himself mostly, but he's got a good heart under all that Mustang pride." Luna listened to Jake's introductions with obvious interest, her intelligent eyes studying each of the horses as if assessing their characters and potential for friendship. When Chester extended his muzzle toward her through the fence, she responded in kind, the two horses sharing a moment of connection that brought tears to Jake's eyes. They continued their tour of the ranch, visiting the various outbuildings and facilities that made up Luna's new world. Jake showed her the feed room, where her meals were prepared, the tack room where Emma's halter would be stored alongside the equipment for the other horses, and the round pen where she would eventually begin her training when she was ready. The walk concluded at a small hill that overlooked the entire ranch, providing a panoramic view of the pastures, the barn, and the distant mountains that formed the backdrop to this peaceful valley. Jake had chosen this spot carefully, knowing that Luna would need to feel that she could survey her entire domain, that she had some understanding of the boundaries and layout of her new territory. "This is your home now," Jake said as they stood together on the hilltop. "It's not the same as what you had with Emma, and it never will be, but it's a place where you can be safe and loved and valued for who you are. Emma would want that for you, wouldn't she?" Luna turned to look at Jake directly, her dark eyes holding a depth of understanding that took his breath away. In that moment, he realized that she wasn't just beginning to accept her new circumstances, she was beginning to choose them. The difference was subtle but crucial, marking the shift from passive survival to active participation in her own recovery. That evening, for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Luna ate her entire dinner and spent a peaceful night in her stall without pacing or calling out in distress. Jake found her the next morning standing calmly in her paddock, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "Good morning, beautiful," he greeted her, and for the first time, Luna approached him immediately, pressing her forehead against his chest in the gesture of trust and affection that had been the beginning of their partnership at the cemetery. Jake stroked her neck gently, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing and the relaxed warmth of her body. "Are you ready for the next step?" he asked softly. "Because I think it's time you met your new herdmates properly." Luna's ears pricked forward with interest, and Jake took that as his answer. The time had come to integrate her fully into the life of the ranch, to help her understand that healing didn't mean forgetting Emma, but rather honoring her memory by learning to love and trust again. The process of introducing Luna to the other horses required careful planning and gradual steps. Jake began by allowing her to share fence line contact with Chester during their morning walks, the old quarter horse's calm presence serving as a bridge between Luna's isolation and full integration with the herd. Chester seemed to understand his role instinctively, positioning himself near the fence whenever Luna appeared, and offering the kind of patient, non-demanding companionship that grieving creatures need most. His age and experience had taught him the value of simply being present, of offering comfort without expectations or pressure. Daisy Montana, meanwhile, showed her eagerness to welcome Luna by bringing her small gifts,
Interesting rocks, particularly sweet clumps of grass, even flowers that she would drop near the fence that separated them. Her gestures were so obviously motivated by kindness that even Luna's grief-clouded mind couldn't miss the intention behind them. Ranger's approach was different but equally valuable. The Mustang's natural wariness and independence seemed to resonate with Luna's current emotional state. He didn't push for interaction, but made it clear that he understood what it meant to be displaced, to find yourself in unfamiliar territory and have to decide whether to trust the humans who claim to want to help. After 2 weeks of careful preparation, Jake made the decision to allow Luna into the main pasture for short, supervised visits. The first integration session lasted only 30 minutes, with Jake remaining in the pasture to monitor the interactions and ensure that no conflicts arose. Luna entered the pasture with obvious nervousness, her head high and her muscles tense as she assessed this new environment and the horses that called it home. Chester immediately approached her with his characteristic calm confidence, offering his muzzle in greeting and invitation. The contact between them was brief but significant, establishing Chester's role as Luna's sponsor and protector within the herd hierarchy. Daisy's approach was more exuberant. Her excitement at finally meeting Luna face-to-face caused her to prance and toss her head in gestures of play and welcome. Luna was initially startled by this energetic greeting, but something in her obvious joy seemed to awaken a memory of happier times, and she responded with a soft nicker that sounded almost like laughter. Ranger maintained his distance but kept Luna in sight all times. His behavior suggested that he had accepted her presence and was prepared to defend her if necessary. For a horse that had once been wild and completely independent, this protective stance represented a significant gesture of acceptance and inclusion. The session concluded without incident, and Luna returned to her private paddock with obvious reluctance. Jake interpreted this as a positive sign that she was beginning to feel the pull of herd companionship, the natural horse desire for social connection that grief had temporarily suppressed. Over the following days, the integration sessions grew longer and more relaxed. Luna began to graze alongside the other horses, her body language gradually shifting from watchful tension to peaceful contentment. She developed particular friendships with each of her new herdmates, relationships that addressed different aspects of her emotional needs. With Chester, she found the steady, grandfatherly presence that provided security and wisdom. The old horse seemed to understand her grief in a way that transcended species, offering the kind of wordless comfort that came from shared experience with loss and survival. Daisy became Luna's companion in rediscovering joy, her playful nature and irrepressible optimism serving as a gentle reminder that life could still hold moments of happiness and fun. Under Daisy's influence, Luna began to engage in the kind of mutual grooming and playful interactions that indicated a return to normal horse social behavior. Rangers offered Luna something equally valuable, the understanding that it was possible to trust again without surrendering your independence or forgetting your past. His own journey from wild Mustang to ranch horse provided a template for transformation that honored both what had been lost and what might be gained. Jake watched these developing relationships with deep satisfaction, understanding that Luna's integration with the herd represented far more than simple companionship. She was learning to be a horse again, to participate in the complex social dynamics that were fundamental to her species' well-being. The breakthrough that Jake had been waiting for came during Luna's 3rd week at the ranch. He had been working with Thunder in the round pen when he noticed Luna watching intently from the pasture fence. On impulse, he decided to see if she might be interested in joining the training session. "Would you like to come work with us, Luna?" he called to her, opening the gate to the round pen. Luna's response was immediate and unmistakable. She approached the gate with purposeful strides, her head held high and her eyes bright with interest. As she entered the round pen, her entire demeanor changed, shifting from that of a grieving animal to that of a working horse ready to engage with her human partner. What followed was nothing short of magical. Luna demonstrated that despite her trauma, she had retained all of the training and skills that Emma had so carefully developed. She responded to Jake's voice commands with precision and grace, moving through gates and transitions with the fluid ease of a horse that understood and enjoyed the collaborative dance of human-horse partnership. Thunder watched from the center of the pen, his young mind processing this demonstration of what was possible between horse and human when trust and communication replaced fear and dominance. Luna's example proved more effective than any training technique Jake could have employed, showing the colt that cooperation was not surrender, but partnership. The session lasted nearly an hour, with Luna displaying not just her technical skills, but her obvious pleasure in the work itself.
Her ears remained forward throughout the exercise, her breathing stayed relaxed and rhythmic, and her body language expressed the deep satisfaction that came from meaningful activity shared with a trusted partner. When Jake finally called for a halt, Luna approached him directly, pressing her forehead against his chest in the gesture that had become their signature greeting. But this time, there was something different in her touch, a sense of commitment and partnership that hadn't been present before. "Thank you," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion.
Thank you for trusting me enough to work with me. Emma would be so proud of you. That evening, as Jake completed his daily routine of feeding and checking on all the horses, he found Luna standing quietly in her stall, her head turned toward the window that faced in the direction of Peaceful Valley Cemetery. She wasn't pacing or calling out in distress, but simply standing in peaceful contemplation, as if communing with memories that brought comfort rather than pain. Jake understood that Luna had reached a crucial milestone in her healing journey. She was learning to carry Emma's memory with her as a source of strength rather than a burden of grief, to honor their partnership by forming new connections rather than retreating into isolation. The transformation wasn't complete, and Jake knew that Luna would always carry the mark of her loss, but she was no longer defined by her grief. She was becoming something new. A horse who had loved deeply, lost profoundly, and found the courage to open her heart again to new possibilities and new partnerships. As he turned off the barn lights and headed toward the house, Jake reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought Luna to this point. From a magnificent mare standing vigil at her beloved human's grave to a horse ready to embrace life and love again, Luna's story was a testament to the resilience of the spirit and the healing power of patience, understanding, and unconditional love. The hardest part of Luna's journey was behind her, but Jake knew that the most beautiful chapters were yet to be written. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities for growth, and he looked forward to discovering what extraordinary things would emerge from the partnership they were building together. 3 months had passed since Luna first arrived at Healing Hearts Ranch, and the transformation in the magnificent paint mare was nothing short of miraculous. The hollow-eyed creature who had refused to leave Emma's graveside had blossomed into a vibrant, engaged horse who brought joy and purpose to everyone around her. Yet Jake knew that Luna's true test lay ahead, a decision that would determine not just her future, but the legacy of love that Emma had left behind. The call came on a crisp October morning as Jake was finishing his rounds in the barn. Dr. Martinez's voice carried an excitement that immediately caught his attention. "Jake, I've got something that might interest you. There's a therapeutic riding program starting up in Missoula, specifically designed for children who've experienced trauma. They're looking for special horses, ones with the temperament and training to work with kids who need gentle healing." I immediately thought of Luna. Jake paused in his task of refilling water troughs, his mind racing through the implications. Luna had indeed shown remarkable progress in her training, displaying not just technical skill, but an intuitive understanding of human emotions that was rare even among therapy horses. Her own journey through grief and recovery had given her a sensitivity to suffering that could be invaluable in helping others heal. "Tell me more about the program," Jake said, settling onto a hay bale as Luna approached her stall door, drawn by the sound of his voice. "It's called Hope's Haven, founded by a woman named Rebecca Walsh. She lost her own daughter in a riding accident 5 years ago and has dedicated herself to creating a safe space where children can find healing through connection with horses. The program focuses specifically on kids who've lost parents, siblings, or experienced other traumatic losses." The parallels to Luna's own story were impossible to ignore. Jake reached through the stall bars to stroke Luna's neck, feeling the steady warmth of her breathing and the alert attention she gave to every word he said. "What would it involve for Luna?" he asked. "Initial assessment and training certification, which could take several months. If she qualifies, she'd work with children individually and in small groups, always under careful supervision. It's demanding work, Jake, but for the right horse, it can be incredibly fulfilling." After ending the call, Jake spent the afternoon in deep contemplation,
watching Luna interact with the other horses and processing the possibility that her journey might be leading to something even greater than her own healing. Emma had been a teacher, someone who dedicated her life to nurturing young minds. Perhaps Luna was meant to carry on that legacy in her own unique way. That evening, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He loaded Luna into the trailer and drove the familiar route back to Peaceful Valley Cemetery, something he had done monthly since her arrival at the ranch. These visits had become an important part of Luna's continued healing, allowing her to maintain her connection to Emma while reinforcing her ability to leave and return to her new life. The cemetery looked different in the autumn light. The oak tree's leaves transformed into a canopy of gold and amber that rustled softly in the evening breeze. Emma's grave was well tended, with fresh flowers that told Jake that others continued to remember and honor the young woman who had touched so many lives. Luna approached the headstone with a reverent calm that had replaced her earlier desperation. She no longer stood vigil with frantic energy, but rather visited with the peaceful acceptance of someone saying hello to a beloved friend. Jake watched as she lowered her head to the granite marker, her breath creating small clouds in the cool air as she communed silently with memories that brought comfort rather than anguish. "Emma," Jake said softly, addressing both the grave and the mare who stood beside it. "I need to tell you about an opportunity that's come up for Luna. There are children who need healing, kids who've lost someone important just like Luna lost you. She could help them. Use her own experience with grief to guide others through their darkest moments." Luna lifted her head, her dark eyes finding Jake's face with an intensity that seemed to suggest she understood every word. Her ears were pricked forward with interest, her body language alert and engaged rather than sorrowful. But it would mean change, new training, new responsibilities, new people to trust and care for. I wanted to bring her here to ask what you think Emma would want for Luna. Would she want her to help other broken hearts learn to heal? As if in response to his question, a gentle breeze stirred the flowers on Emma's grave, lifting several petals that danced around Luna's legs before settling on the ground like a blessing. Luna whickered softly, a sound that held none of the desperation of her earlier grief, but rather a note of recognition and purpose. Jake took that as his answer. Over the following weeks, he began preparing Luna for the evaluation process that would determine her suitability for therapeutic work. The training was intensive, focusing not just on basic obedience, but on the specific skills needed to work safely with emotionally vulnerable children. Luna proved to be a natural. Her own journey through trauma had given her an almost supernatural ability to sense distress in others and respond with exactly the right combination of gentle attention and patient presence. She learned to stand perfectly still while small hands explored her coat, to lower her head so that even the tiniest child could reach her face, and to remain calm in the face of unexpected sounds or sudden movements that might accompany emotional breakthroughs. The evaluation day arrived in November, bringing with it a team of experts from Hopeshaven who would assess Luna's readiness for therapeutic work. Rebecca Walsh herself made the trip, a woman whose own eyes held the same depth of loss and healing that Jake recognized in Luna. "She's beautiful," Rebecca said, as she watched Luna work through a series of exercises designed to test her temperament and training. "But more than that, there's something in her presence that suggests she understands suffering in a way that most horses never will." Jake shared Luna's story as they observed her interactions with the evaluation team, watching as she demonstrated the perfect balance of gentleness and strength that made an ideal therapy horse. When one of the evaluators accidentally dropped a clipboard, creating a sharp noise that would have startled most horses, Luna simply turned her head to investigate before returning her attention to the task at hand. "Remarkable," Rebecca murmured. "It's as if she's learned that not everything unexpected is a threat, that sometimes disruption can lead to healing rather than harm." The formal evaluation concluded with a unanimous recommendation for acceptance into the Hopeshaven program. Luna had not only met every requirement, but had exceeded expectations in ways that surprised even the experienced professionals who had seen hundreds of horses over the years. As the evaluation team prepared to leave, Rebecca approached Jake with an unexpected proposition. "I'd like to offer you a position as well."
Your work with Luna shows exactly the kind of understanding and patience we need in our program leaders. Would you consider relocating to Missoula and joining our team permanently? The offer took Jake completely by surprise. He had expected to send Luna off to her new life while remaining at Healing Hearts Ranch with his other horses. The possibility of continuing their partnership in this new context was something he hadn't dared to hope for. That night, Jake sat in Luna's stall as he had done so many times during her early days at the ranch, processing the magnitude of the decision before them. Luna stood quietly beside him, her presence as comforting to him as it had become to so many others. "What do you think, beautiful girl?" he asked softly. "Are you ready for the next adventure? Ready to use everything you've learned to help other souls find their way through the darkness?" Luna's response was to rest her chin gently on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and partnership that had become their signature communication. In that moment, Jake knew that their journey together was far from over. It was simply evolving into something even more meaningful than either of them could have imagined. The transition to Hope's Haven took place in early December, with Luna making the move to her new home with the confidence of a horse who had learned that change could bring growth rather than loss. The facility was specifically designed for therapeutic work, with special arenas, walking pads, and quiet spaces where healing could happen at its own pace. Luna's first client was a 7-year-old girl named Sophia, whose mother had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. The child hadn't spoken since the funeral. Her grief so profound that traditional therapy had made little progress. When she first saw Luna, however, something in the mare's patient presence seemed to reach through the walls that sorrow had built around her heart. Jake watched from a distance as Luna stood perfectly still while Sophia approached with halting steps. The connection between them was immediate and electric. Two souls who had walked through the valley of loss, recognizing something essential in each other. "She's beautiful," Sophia whispered, the first words she had spoken in months. Her small hand reached out to touch Luna's velvety nose, and the mare responded by lowering her head even further, making herself accessible to the grieving child. Over the following weeks, Jake witnessed miracle after miracle as Luna worked with children whose hearts had been shattered by loss. Each interaction was different, but Luna seemed to instinctively know what each child needed. With some, she was playful and energetic, coaxing smiles from faces that had forgotten how to express joy. With others, she was a calm presence that absorbed tears and offered wordless comfort. The transformation wasn't limited to the children. Jake found that his own understanding of healing deepened as he watched Luna apply the lessons of her own recovery to help others. She had learned that grief wasn't something to be overcome, but rather something to be integrated, transformed from a source of pain into a wellspring of compassion. One afternoon, as winter snow began to fall outside the arena windows, Jake received a call that brought their journey full circle. Mrs. Henderson's voice carried both sadness and hope as she delivered her news. "Jake, I wanted you to know that David Hartwell has decided to establish a memorial fund in Emma's name. It's going to provide scholarships for young people who want to study veterinary medicine or animal therapy. He said that knowing what Luna accomplished has helped him understand what Emma would have wanted her legacy to be." Jake looked across the arena where Luna was working with a group of teenage boys who had lost their father in a military deployment. Her patience with their anger, her gentle insistence that they could trust again, was transforming not just their relationship with horses, but their ability to connect with life itself. "There's something else," Mrs. Henderson continued. "David wants to come visit Luna, to see what she's doing now. He said he needs to understand how Emma's love for that horse has rippled out to touch so many other lives." When David arrived the following week, he was accompanied by a surprise visitor. A young woman with Emma's eyes and gentle smile introduced herself as Emma's sister, Claire, who had driven from Seattle specifically to meet the horse who had loved her sisters so deeply.
I had to see for myself, Claire explained, as they watched Luna work with Sophia, who had progressed from silent grief to tentative joy over the months of their partnership. Emma wrote about Luna in every letter, every phone call. She said that loving Luna had taught her what unconditional devotion really meant. Luna seemed to sense the significance of these visitors, approaching them with the same gentle curiosity she showed to all newcomers. When Claire extended her hand, Luna investigated thoroughly, her nostrils flaring as she detected familiar scents that connected her to memories of Emma. "She knows," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She knows I'm Emma's sister." David watched in amazement as Luna allowed both visitors to stroke her neck and speak softly to her. "I almost had her put down," he admitted quietly. "I thought her grief made her dangerous, unusable. I had no idea that her capacity to love so deeply would become her greatest gift." As spring returned to Montana, bringing with it new growth and renewed hope, Jake reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all to this moment. Luna had evolved from a grieving horse standing vigil at a grave to a healer whose very presence could transform pain into purpose. The children she worked with began to refer to her as their heart horse, a term that perfectly captured her ability to understand and nurture damaged souls. Parents who had watched their children retreat into shells of grief saw them emerge, slowly but surely, into the light of new possibilities. Emma's memorial fund grew, supporting young people who shared her passion for helping animals and healing hearts. Luna's story became part of the fund's mission statement, a testament to the power of love to transcend even death itself. One evening, as Jake finished his daily routine at Hope's Haven, he found Luna standing at the fence of her pasture, her face turned toward the distant mountains that separated her from Peaceful Valley Cemetery. But there was no sadness in her posture, no longing to return to her old vigil. "You understand now, don't you?" Jake said softly, approaching to stand beside her. "Emma didn't want you to spend your life mourning her. She wanted you to take all that love she gave you and share it with others who needed it just as desperately as you once did." Luna turned to regard him with those wise, dark eyes that had seen so much sorrow and learned to transform it into something beautiful. Her gentle nicker seemed to say that yes, she understood perfectly. She had found her true calling, her way of honoring Emma's memory while building a legacy of healing that would touch countless lives. As the stars emerged in the Montana sky, Jake reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all to this moment. Luna had evolved from a grieving horse standing vigil at a grave to a healer whose very presence could transform pain into purpose. The children she worked with began to refer to her as their heart horse, a term that perfectly captured her ability to understand and nurture damaged souls. Parents who had watched their children retreat into shells of grief saw them emerge, slowly but surely, into the light of new possibilities. Emma's memorial fund grew, supporting young people who shared her passion for helping animals and healing hearts. Luna's story became part of the fund's mission statement, a testament to the power of love to transcend even death itself. Up next, you got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.